We go team by team and tell you where the Buccaneers are better and worse than their NFC South rivals. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to a WTSP Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. And don't forget, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, follow us on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, joined by my WTSP Wednesday cohort, Mr. Evan Klosky, on Twitter at eKloskyWTSP, and on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. We are here with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday during this slow period, but in less than a month, we're going to be back to 5 days a week. But we want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Shout out to our everydayers. I'm not real sold on Bryce Young. That's coming up here in a little bit. We are going to go team by team through the NFC South and take a look at where these teams improved and are currently, from our perspective, better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But we're also going to take a look at where they're not quite as good or they're flat out terrible, and basically where the Buccaneers stack up in the NFC South. In this way too early, it's only June. We haven't even started sniffing training camp yet. Preview of the NFC South. So, Evan, let's start with the Atlanta Falcons. They made quite a few additions. It seemed like for a month straight, every tweet that Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter sent out, it was, this player is signing with this team in the NFC South, and seemed like pretty much all of them were the Atlanta Falcons. So some key additions to the Falcons roster: you got Jesse Bates, Calais Campbell, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Mike Hughes, Bud Dupree, Mac Hollins, Trey Flowers, Scotty Miller, and of course, Bijan Robinson. Some key losses: Isaiah Oliver, Michael Ford, Jermaine Afidi. So you take a look at the way the Falcons are constructed. They have a second-year quarterback now in Desmond Ridder. We didn't really get to see a whole lot of what he could do, but we saw it at the University of Cincinnati. He's a solid player. We'll see if it translates to the NFL. But where do you see, as far as where the Falcons are better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, taking a look at these two teams on paper?
I mean, I really like what they did on the edges. I mean, they've already had Grady Jarrett. We know how amazing he is. And then you bring in Calais Campbell. So, the counter argument is maybe they're kind of looking a little bit like the Buccaneers, where they're a little bit slower, older. Now, they're certainly very effective at the same time, so don't get me wrong, excellent players. But beyond that, I think that, running back certainly is where they're thriving. And, I like their offensive line. But really the number one thing for me is probably the running back position and how deep they are between Bijan, Algier, Cordero Patterson, and Caleb Huntley. I mean, and not to mention in that offensive system, they're going to run the stuffing out of the ball in a myriad of ways. We're going to see something that's probably a little bit different than what any other team in the National Football League runs, which makes them very intriguing. As far as the defense is concerned, I'm not 100% sure where I stand on them. I just there's so many kind of new pieces and just a new look to it where, on paper, the players are good. I just need to see how they gel. I think that's a very important part of a defense, is how you work in concert with each other. And that's going to be a significant point of emphasis for this team entering training camp. So,
Yeah, and of course we don't know what Bijan Robinson is going to be. We can project all day long. Obviously, I was on this show pounding the table for the Bucs to draft Bijan Robinson if the opportunity presented itself, because we all think that he's going to be very, very good. Maybe he's not. We all kind of thought the same thing about Trent Richardson, and he fizzled out very, very quickly.
I guess he did have at least one good season. I forget what his stats were.
Right? Yeah, I mean, he had a good season, and then all of a sudden he gets traded to the Colts and falls off the face of the earth. You just never know. That's why we have the draft hits, draft misses, and worst draft pick list of all time and all that. But you're right. On paper, you take a look at the Falcons running back stable, you take a look at the Buccaneers, advantage Falcons. And of course you had mentioned they're going to run it a lot of different ways. That includes Desmond Ridder. So, I'm with you 100% there. But now taking a look at the two teams, where do the Falcons not stack up as well against the Buccaneers, and where do you see some of the Bucs advantages?
Wide receiver. I mean, I like Drake London, but Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are better than what you're going to have with Drake London, Matt Collins, and Scotty Miller. Scotty Miller barely hung on the roster last year with this Buccaneers team, and now he's going to be thrust in that wide receiver 3 role. So, I like the Bucs there. I think at bare minimum, it's equal at quarterback. Desmond Ridder, Baker Mayfield, like you can't genuinely give me an argument where one is certainly better than the other. You can hope that, Baker honestly has more of a resume than Desmond Ridder. So while you're selling me on hope with Ridder, I think that the Bucs, I'm going to say this with probably every team, their offensive line depth is, not necessarily saying that the stars of the O-line, but I think that their depth probably is, for me, the best in the division. So I'm just going to state that now. And and do we believe that Kuda is going to be what he was drafted as? Because to me, that would be the linchpin of whether their secondary is better than the Buccaneers. Like, how you view Jeff Okudah out there is going to determine whether you think they're a better secondary unit than the Bucs. But I probably lean towards the Bucs' secondary of Dean, Davis, Winfield, Neal over their 4.
Yeah, I would.
And linebackers, Levante and Devin, assuming Devin plays.
Right. I don't think there's going to be much question there. I think Devin's going to play. I honestly, and I'm probably going to get some hate for this, if you take a look at the two secondaries, I think the Falcons have the best player out of the two teams in Jesse Bates. I just, watching him in Cincinnati, watching what he does, he brings another level to the game. How that, and you already kind of brought it up, how that gels in Atlanta remains to be seen. But Jesse Bates has been an incredible talent for the Bengals for a long time. Had the contract issue, got franchise tag, didn't want to play under the tag. A little bit of bitterness there, and so he left. I would not say he left for greener pastures. I would say he left for a much bigger contract. But as a whole, I'm with you 100%. The secondary in Tampa is more formidable than the one in Atlanta, and spoiler alert, I'm probably going to take the Bucs wide receivers over the rest of the division, but we have plenty more to discuss on that front. 1 down, 2 to go. We're going to break down the Carolina Panthers. That's coming up next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to join today. There is no one in Major League Baseball hotter than the Cincinnati Reds right now. It's hearkening back to the Big Red Machine 50 years later, and now Joey Votto's back. So just keep hammering the Reds money line. until that well runs dry. You don't want to miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or review every day. Every dayers, make sure you come back on Friday as David and I reunite and discuss Tampa Bay Buccaneers related things and discuss football, because that's what we do on this show. We talk about the Buccaneers. We talk about football. Right now, we're going to talk about the Carolina Panthers. They made some additions. They had some losses, I guess, but some key additions to the franchise there in Carolina. Adam Thielen, Miles Sanders, Von Bell, Hayden Hurst, Shai Tuttle, DJ Chark, and of course, their new quarterback, Bryce Young. Key losses, Sam Darnold, I guess, kind of, maybe, I don't know. Deontay Foreman and Corey Littleton. So you take a look at what the Carolina Panthers have done. Adam Thielen 5 years ago, that would have been scary. Right now, it to me feels kind of meh. Miles Sanders, I think, was a great addition. Von Bell, the other guy from Cincinnati, I think he could be a difference maker. But you take a look at this Panthers team, who did give the Buccaneers some serious trouble last year, even as depleted as they were. And what are some advantages that the Panthers have over Tampa Bay this season?
First off, I want to mention that the Falcons, by the way, their over-under for wins is 8.5. I'm going to sneeze first, or maybe not. Let me get the maybe, yes, no, it's gone. It's gone. So there we go. That was some live play-by-play of whether I was going to sneeze or not. I'm going to have the Falcons under, barely. I think they're like an 8-win team. And the Panthers are 7.5, and I think they're going to be under slightly as well. I kind of view them as a 7-win team. I like their defense. I think their offense is going to be in big time trouble. Lots of names who sound pretty, who I don't think in reality are going to be that impactful. Bryce Young, I think he's fantastic, but I'm not going to say that he's going to crush it day one with this team. Miles Sanders, he's got a lot of miles on him, no pun intended. And you got Chuba Hubbard, I get that. But, I don't necessarily know if that's a game changer. Honestly, like Deontay Foreman was probably the best in town at that position. He's not there anymore. You mentioned it with, Thielen, Chark, Terrence Marshall Jr., Laviska Shenault. I mean, there's no one that scares you. Like, here's the thing. Thielen's good if he had, put Thielen in Tampa Bay's offense, and I love him. Godwin, Evans, Thielen. He's a third option. He'll crush it in that role. But as the main guy, think about when they're playing the Bucs. Thielen and Chark are going to go up against Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis. Give me the Bucs in that matchup. I think you just play man-to-man, and, Bowles can get all fun with his blitzes. It's a lot of pressure to put on Bryce Young. I don't think there's a lot of help there. And the offensive line is good. Nothing to write home about. But I love the defense. I love their depth in the secondary. I think they're fantastic there. I love Luvu and Shaq Thompson. I think they're phenomenal. Derek Brown, Brian Burns. I mean, I see a little bit of that Buccaneers-Panthers game, I could just totally see it as a 9-6 gauntlet of a battle.
Don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
Yeah, it's that I just I see both teams kind of struggling to put up points, but their defense is there to kind of get it done. And I would probably say the Panthers, I'm a little I think they're too deep on the defensive side, a little bit better as a whole than the Bucs. As much as I brag about the Bucs offensive line depth, the too deep throughout the entire roster is just not there. Their starters, I'm very bullish on. Once you get to the second group of names, beyond offensive line, there are some issues. So I think the Panthers will be able to weather a little bit more of a storm on the defensive side. But yeah, overall, 7-win team. I'm going under Falcons, under Panthers.
I'm calling it right now on June 20th. Baker Mayfield against the Carolina Panthers in the 2 games combined, 8 touchdown passes. Revenge game galore for Baker Mayfield. 8 of his 19 touchdown passes on the season will come against the Carolina Panthers. But, so far, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in summation of taking a look at the Falcons, taking a look at the Panthers, sounds to me like the way you have this ranked goes Buccaneers, Falcons, Panthers. Would that be an accurate assessment?
No. I think you're going to have Falcons and Panthers Bucks tied.
Okay.
No, sorry. Wait, Falcons. Yeah, Panthers Bucks tied. Yep.
All right.
So I have like Bucks. I think the Bucks peak is going to be a 9-win season. I'm putting them down as 7 wins to be conservative in my eyes. Panthers at 7, Falcons at 8, and then I'm going to jump on the Saints bandwagon in the division.
I'm going to say we'll talk about the Saints here in a little bit. It's like it seems like you go back to the season previews last year, right? And all of a sudden, right as we were coming up on the last couple of weeks leading in to the regular season, the Saints became the super sexy pick for the surprise division winner in the NFL. And it seems like already people are jumping on the Panthers bandwagon, that the Panthers are going to be the super sexy surprise pick to win the NFC South. And I'm kind of with you. I don't see it. I do think they have a pretty good defense. I'm very interested to see how Bryce Young adapts to the NFL game. And I'm not a guy who wants to go out of his way to knock a quarterback for their size, but he does appear to be incredibly small behind the offensive line. Now, we've had successful small quarterbacks in the NFL before. Guys have been able to overcome it. Kyler Murray, he's kind of hot and cold, but he's played really well in some spurts. Drew Brees, not famously, super tall. And obviously he did, Hall of Fame career. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out. And as you pointed out, when your top 2 options are Adam Thielen and DJ Chark, I like DJ Chark. I don't think he's a number 1. I think he's going to be the number 1 on Carolina by default, but I don't see him as a legitimate number 1 receiver in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see how that offense starts to, find their chemistry. And I think Bucs fans know, Panthers fans know, the Panthers are kind of a work in progress. They have a defense, a couple of positions that could be upgraded a little bit, but the offense is going to be a couple of years to start to really build and put together to make it a fully formidable team.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested to what Panthers fans and maybe Locked On Panthers thinks about this team and that offense. Mostly about the offense. Like, are they bullish on the signings? Because to me, I think it's a lot of money and not as much production as they're going to hope for. That's my prognostication.
All right. Well, we had to save them for last. The New Orleans Saints are the next one on the list. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, doing a way too early NFC South preview as to where the Buccaneers stack up against their rivals. Let's talk about the Saints. Saints fans were in their feelings the other day on Twitter talking about how rings don't matter, apparently, and they still own the Buccaneers and yada, yada, yada. It is what it is. Apparently, Saints fans were real bored the other day. But they did make some key additions. They also had some key losses. So the key additions, obviously, first and foremost, Derek Carr their new quarterback. Then you have Jamal Williams, Jonathan Abram, Foster Moreau, Nathan Shepard, and their first-round pick, Brian Brissy. Key losses, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Shai Tuttle, Marcus Davenport, Justin Evans, Kentavious Street, Marquez Callaway. Where, Evan, do you see the Saints having the advantage over Tampa Bay as far as the way their team is constructed?
Running back, I would argue if Michael Thomas is healthy, which right now I'm saying the Bucs have the advantage because he's never healthy. But on paper, if you had Olave, Thomas, and Shaheed, I think that's pretty comparable to what the Buccaneers are doing. I'm a big fan of Shaheed. Big fan. I think him and Olave together are going to be great. I think Olave is going to pop off this year. I'm a big fan of Juwan Johnson and that Foster Moreau thing that they're going to have going. It's two solid tight ends. So give me their tight ends. I guess give me their offensive line. And then as far as the defense is concerned, I think they'll. I mean, Devin and Levante for me is the best in the division, but their linebackers are nothing to sneeze about. I think their secondary is lights out. I think again, pretty comparable, if not a smidge better than Tampa Bay. And what's really going to come from this, first off, Cameron Jordan is the best player, probably the best rusher in the division, historically speaking. I think he takes the cake over anybody in Tampa Bay easily. What's going to be their interior pressure? Curious to know that. They've kind of revamped the defensive line a little bit. So if they can generate the pressure that we're used to kind of seeing from the Saints, I think they are they're the class of the division probably.
That was a whole lot of advantage Saints in that list. Where did the Buccaneers come out on top in your opinion?
I think I'll listen to arguments on the offensive line. I'll listen to arguments on the defensive front. Like I'll give the Bucs Vea and Cansey in the interior defensive line. I'll give that to the Bucs. Until proven otherwise, the Saints, I don't know what they're going to kind of do there. I got to see it. I still lean towards the Bucs at linebacker, though I might say it's a little bit of a break even. We're talking about 3 linebackers versus really, kind of 2, and then what Joe Tryon-Shane could, you know what I'm saying? So, and then, interior defense is probably the one I give the Bucs for sure. Linebacker is one I personally give them, and then, but I understand debates from the Saints, and then the secondary, the starting, those starting 4. Again, I can understand sort of an even point, but if you had to tilt the scale one way versus the other, I'd lean a tiny bit to the Saints, but that's not the. Some of these things on the defensive side are, razor thin. So again, I'll give the wide receivers to the Bucs as well because I can't trust Michael Thomas. So
no, well, he's a Buckeye. You can't trust him.
That's baloney. That's straight up baloney.
I had to throw it in there. Yeah, David's not here for me to make fun of Justin Fields. I got to take my shot at Michael Thomas. I think what it comes down to when the Bucs and the Saints take the field, as it does for a lot of NFL games and a lot of NFL teams, but this matchup more so than any other in the NFC South is going to boil down to the play of the quarterback on the field. Both defenses are really solid. You talked about the Saints secondary being lights out. Bucs are no slouch. You have the really good interior pressure. Hopefully the Bucs have some good edge pressure, depending on how well Shaq Barrett is able to recover from his injury and hopefully a step up from Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. And of course, Cam Jordan's going to do Cam Jordan things. I can't say anything bad about him right now because he just defended Mike Evans. David and I talked about that last week. But it's going to come down to which quarterback can stand taller in that game, because both are going to be under heavy duress. Both are going to have, minuscule windows to throw a football into. So it's going to boil down to Baker or Trask versus Derek Carr, and those players are going to decide this football game. Both of them.
To an extent. If Alvin Kamara, is Kamara going to get suspended? I don't know what to deal with him. But, Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams, it's kind of, Jamal will do the dirty work in the goal line. Alvin will kind of do the jittery stuff on the outside and 20-20. So I don't know if it's going to come down specifically to Baker, Derek. For the most part, it is a quarterback-driven league, so that technically speaking, it's usually going to wind down to what decisions the quarterback are making. My thing is with Derek Carr is I don't know if the contract, the hype is worth it, right? Like, I like the Saints over 9.5 wins. Do I love the Saints to be Super Bowl contenders? Not necessarily, because in the division, I think Derek Carr is probably the best QB, and I think he's very formidable. But when you get into the playoffs and you start going up against the best of the best, will he be able to go toe-to-toe with like a Jalen Hurts, who I think is a lot better than him? I don't know. I don't know how he stacks up against luckily for him, all the quarterbacks live on the AFC side of things, so he doesn't have to run into them until a potential Super Bowl. But, I think there's debate to be had of where he ranks in your list of top 10 quarterbacks. And if he's going to be on that list, he's certainly going to be towards 9, 10, if he even makes it. So, you have to kind of look at where he is in a division, where he is in a bigger picture of the postseason run, and where he is in the league. And so that's where the kind of Saints are in my eyes. They're division winners, and unless their defense is completely lights out like the Buccaneers were in 2020 when they won the Super Bowl in the playoffs, I don't think they're going to have enough juice, offensively speaking, for him to make that kind of run.
Fair enough. Now, FanDuel, our good friends, they have the New Orleans Saints as the favorites to win the division. They have Atlanta second. They have Carolina third. They have Tampa a distant fourth. I think the odds for Carolina were like plus 320. The odds for Tampa are plus 600. We were talking distant odds for Tampa to win the division. But, as we started to kind of lay out in the last segment, it seems like, other than the wide gap that FanDuel has between Carolina and Tampa, it sounds like you're pretty much in agreement there that it's going to go New Orleans, Atlanta, and then Carolina, Tampa tied, separated by maybe one game here in this way too early projection.
Yeah, to me, I find that the Falcons, Panthers, Bucs are going to be kind of clumped. A little bit like last year, to be honest, with the teams. All the teams were clumped to an extent. I think those bottom three teams are going to be hanging around in similar areas. Maybe they're exchanging wins, in the season series, 1-1-1-1, like everyone's just taking 1-1 versus each other. And then the Saints kind of clean up in the division elsewhere and maybe rattle off like a 5-1 NFC South record. And that will kind of be their impetus to winning the division again, for the first time in a couple of years, taking it from the Bucs, and make their way into the postseason as like a 10-11 win team. But, for me, I think people are too high on the Falcons, too high on the Panthers, too low on the Bucs, probably about right on the Saints. I will use an asterisk on the Falcons because I do trust that the offensive system with Bijan and the other three running backs I mentioned in our first segment I do believe something innovative and creative is going to come out of Arthur Smith's playbook, and he's going to razzle dazzle his way to some weird style that is just going to work. How effectively, I don't know. That remains to be seen. I got to see Bijan go to work. I'm pretty confident he's going to be darn good in this league, but there's a little bit of an unknown on June 20th, what the offense is going to look like for him and what these running backs are going to look like rotating constantly. But yeah, I mean, I imagine we'll see stuff where Bijan, Patterson, and Algier are on the field together, and they're just kind of shifting things around and doing new look stuff. So be prepared for what the Falcons are going to do. But overall, people are running with – they've been bad for a while, so I can't just magically leap them up when there wasn't some transformative change outside of drafting a running back who I think is excellent. You know, the Giants had Saquon Barkley too. Fantastic. It didn't transform them into this juggernaut or this sleeper story. So I'm just not fully on that bandwagon yet. But come week 3 of the season, I could be circling back and being like, I knew Arthur Smith had this offense in his sleeve, and it's so dang good. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, Titans fans' heads will explode all over the place if that happens, and we'll revisit this. You know, as we get closer to the season, maybe come the bye week, we'll revisit this and see how things are starting to play out as the NFL season progresses. But for now, we are all done here. Now, if you have reactions, if you want to rank how you think the NFC South teams are going to finish, of course, you can do so in the YouTube comments. You can send us an email to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com, or of course, slide in the DMs on Twitter at LockedOnBucs. We want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day, for making us part of your day, part of your routine. And if you have anything else Tampa Bay Buccaneers related that you want to discuss, you want to throw out there, of course, follow us on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucks, and at eCloskey WTSP. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.